Metroid Prime is nothing short of a miracle. This GameCube classic is so revered across the gaming industry that it needs no introduction. The coherence between the environment, score, sound choices, colours, and character designs feels like a perfectly devised vision for an unforgettable atmospheric adventure. However, if you were to look at its rocky development, Metroid Prime was a game that had almost no hope of being completed, let alone seeing itself as one of the most beloved games of its era. Between drastic changes in direction and mass layoffs, this unstable project really was only seen to the end by the resilience of its talented and overworked developers. So, against all odds, how did the team pull it off? Here at Shinesparkers, we've had many wonderful opportunities to talk to all branches of staff involved with the inner workings of our favourite Metroid games. So today, let us share with you 7 facts that we learned from some of the creatives behind 2002's Metroid Prime. Samus's redesign was the work of at least 8 people. It can be easy for us consumers to forget how many hands often go into even a single aspect of a creative work. On the surface, it may seem straightforward for retro studios to translate Samus's design from Super Metroid into 3D, but in reality, it required an initial main model by Mike Sneath, with a separate gun model by Ludovic Texier, and texturing by Rodney Brunet, which was used in early trailers. Then, it needed new concept art by Andrew Jones in collaboration with Todd Keller, so that Gene Kohler could enhance Samus's entire model and textures for a final look, with new weapon models created by Chris Volman, all of which was supervised by Nintendo staff from Japan, most likely under Tomoyoshi Yamane. We also had the opportunity to ask Metroid Prime environment artist LeRoy Strauss about Samus's famously impossible shoulder joints, as he later redesigned this iconic suit again for its sequel. The team's choice to effectively give 2 shoulder joints per arm to Samus came from finding the right compromise that could keep her iconic silhouette and give more leeway to the Prime Games animation teams, without exposing how inhuman this is in practice. All this work and iteration was to design one character, and yet Samus was only one of many needed. A whole year's worth of enemies were scrapped. If you think it's wild to finish one Varia suit before starting over from scratch, then what if we told you that every enemy that was made over the course of a year was binned? Not just models and textures either, but animations and AI too. Like with Samus's suit, the reasoning was because they felt too faithful to the look of old Metroid, instead of using the liberation of the third dimension to give them a fresh look. So yes, they were all entirely redone, and that's no short feat. After concept art, the average creature could take anywhere between 4 days to a fortnight to model, and that model needed to fulfill the concept and gameplay needs on top of getting a texture pass, and only then could animation and programming begin. Giving the bosses a model took an even longer 3 weeks, and they weren't immune from getting a do-over either. The initial model for our beloved cyborg Meta Ridley was much more amalgamated compared to his almost purely metallic form in the final game. So that invites the question, were there any bosses that were just scrapped entirely? Kraid was real. We were blessed to have the technical lead engineer of the Prime trilogy, Jack Mathews, on the Shinesparkers podcast, where he shared some attempts at creating bosses that were left on the cutting room floor. One famous example he expanded upon is Ice Boss, which Shinesparkers has separately sleuthed out as being called the Sabergouth. This creature was made alongside the initial scrapped enemies and was intended for the area that would become Phendrana Drifts. Despite having some animations made, Mathews explained to us that it was really just a concept, and no real work was done on implementing it into a playable battle. Another boss that met a similar fate, despite having an existing reputation, was a giant, cybernetically enhanced Kraid, to parallel Meta Ridley. This, let's call him Meta Kraid, was a running joke throughout Prime's development, for the simple reason that nobody believed that he would actually be finished. And, well, I guess they got that one right. Meta Kraid got as far as being modelled and being assigned a placement in the game's world, but ultimately without the time to give him animations, AI, or even to finish the concept for his boss battle design, which would have involved a lot of platforming, this quote-unquote Meta Kraid lost his tendency in the Phazon Mines to the Omega Pirate, whose fight cleverly reused enough existing assets and code from other mooks like the Elite Pirates to fit into Prime's remaining development time. Sorry, Kraid. Iconic Room's designs began as notebook sketches. We briefly mentioned LeRoy Strauss earlier, the environment artist who formed the ideas for many recognizable rooms seen throughout Metroid Prime, and miraculously, Strauss still has many of the first notebook sketches for the key decoration structures that make up the now revered environments of one of Metroid's most popular titles. Environments that have now been expanded upon for a new generation in 2023's Metroid Prime Remastered. Memorable locales such as the Artifact Temple and Phendrana shorelines took such care that the team might have gone just a little over schedule finishing them. The full gallery of sketches can be seen in our interview with Strauss on our website in the link below. The sound design was changing from start to finish. Our interview with Tommy Tallarico has been made well known thanks to a popular Roblox video by HBomberGuy, who also drew attention to another interview of ours with Clark Wen. Combined with additional research by music producer Synamax, an expert on the sound of the Prime games, we start to see the story of Metroid Prime's constantly changing audio development. Initially, Tallarico Studios was hired to work on the project as it was ditching its Metaforce moniker and becoming a Metroid game. Pivotal sound effects for the likes of Samus's cannon, menus, and peripheral items were given to the game by their sound designer Joey Cordes, until Retro Studios' other staff were forced to cancel all of the games they were making and focus their efforts squarely on Prime. Tallarico Studios' contract ended, and their role was inherited by Retro's internal audio department and audio lead, Clark Wen. Even after Samus's suit got its previously mentioned second iteration, Kuros' sound effects stuck, and Wen filled in the remaining arsenal and the rest of the game's sounds, relying almost solely on synths instead of traditional Foley props. Since it took longer than normal for the team to have a composer, Wen also designed creative ambiences that could cover the areas on their own, just in case it ended up with little to no music. For example, an ambience from the Chozo Ruins entrance was constructed from slowing down and processing the roar of a lion. Once Super Metroid's Kenji Yamamoto was eventually brought on for the score, the two worked closely together to perfect the sound of Metroid Prime, with perfect being key. On the day before the game was to go gold, Clark Wen was bug testing at 9 PM when he got a call from Yamamoto-san with a slew of last-minute adjustments he wanted done to music cues and volume, which took about 4 hours to finish. The final product, however, speaks for itself, and Prime's sound effects have carried on into future games like Metroid Other M, and for now can even be heard in the trailer for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. There are even more insights into this fascinating side of Prime's development in the video by Synamax below. Samus's voice was kind of complicated. Another set of sounds that have persisted throughout the Prime games came in the form of Samus's effort noises. However, since Samus's voice wasn't credited and relevant information was scarce, it took some serious digging from the Shinesparkers team to find the remaining pieces and put them together. A May 2009 issue of Nintendo Power accredited Jennifer Hale to the voice. However, there's a twist, as when Clark Wen was asked about this mystery, he revealed that it was Nintendo who provided her voice clips, and while he confirmed that some voice clips were labeled JH, others were voiced by one VM, specifically because her provided death scream more closely matched the one in Super Metroid. The second voice was eventually confirmed to be Vanessa Marshall, who responded to a message from Shinesparkers on the day of release for Metroid Prime Remastered. With that said, we still don't know who voiced Samus's unused monologue from the internal files of Metroid Prime. Wen told us that Nintendo EAD fully arranged this voiceover independently and asked him to implement it as a test, and then asked him to get rid of it. Wen also had to come up with a noise or voice for Dark Samus's reveal in the 100% ending for the game, but once again without the liberty of time on his side. Under the circumstances, he efficiently warped and processed an existing unused voice clip for Samus, and while he was later given more freedom in the sequel, he'd already fallen in love with his previous last-minute solution, and thus going forward, Dark Samus's voice remained a twisted copy of her rivals. Creative solutions under brutal time limits are the running theme in Prime's development, and that wasn't even the biggest example that we were told. The Phazon suit's design was completely unplanned. We've seen how complicated it was just to make Samus's base Varia suit, so you can imagine the stress of being asked to make another armor while burning the candle at both ends at the 11th hour. That was the position that Mike Sneath was put into. Without enough time to even make a proper concept, Todd Keller told Sneath to just mess around with shaders until something looked cool. So, in the mere couple of days afforded to him, Sneath settled upon the charred steel look for his retexture that would become Prime's only new armor for Samus, the Phazon suit. It's wild to think how much of the iconography of the most played Metroid game of all time came from creative compromises under highly unfavorable constraints. The Shinesparkers team extends their highest respects to every name that made it to the game's credits, and even the many that didn't. So, the next time you play the game, on the original GameCube, with the tight motion controls of the Wii, or with its breathtaking overhaul for Switch, just remember to be that little bit more grateful of what it took for you to experience the beauty of Metroid Prime. Head to the Shinesparkers website below to read and hear our full conversations with these amazing developers.
What do y'all think of the story of the Sakamoto Metroid games? You know, like, I worked on the Metroid Prime games, and we virtually weren't allowed to have a story because...
And subscribe to the channel for more Shinesparkers Archives and other Metroid content.